Hey, Travis here at Exercise Lab with another short for you guys today. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy for those of you who don't know me, and I gave you guys a little teaser, a short last week, just kind of showing you this thing, but I wanted to make good on that and actually bring you guys the video. Didn't want to rush into it. I've had about a week to use this thing now. This is the latest and greatest from Kabuki Power. This is their Transformer X bar, which is kind of their newest baby. I was a big fan of the original Transformer bar, use it all the time, still do it to this day. And I want to talk to you guys about this new thing and, does it make good in the claims? Obviously, the guys at Kabuki make some great products. I've tried several of them, but they're obviously also interested in selling bars. I don't need to sell bars, and so I just want to give you guys kind of my thoughts, critique this thing a little bit. They sort of tell you the squats are going to do themselves on this thing. I don't necessarily know that's the case. So I want to talk to you guys about what this thing can and cannot do, sort of pros and cons against the original Transformer bar. And then for those of you who are not, familiar with the Transformer bar, is this thing worth, shelling out the extra money for? And obviously for those of you who are familiar and have an old Transformer bar, is this worth shelling out, more money for, and all that good stuff today. So if you're interested in learning a little more about that stuff, go ahead and stay tuned, and we'll get started. Okay, so just coming through is kind of our first look. Main thing that stands out is obviously it's got this cool pad by AbMat. It certainly looks cool, I will say. It's detachable, which is pretty awesome. So you can, in theory, throw this thing on an older Transformer bar. I actually haven't done that yet, but apparently they say you can. As you can see, it's got that kind of, cut out little inlay thing, so you can just kind of pop it off and on. So I do like that. What I also like is because it pops off and on so easily, storage is a little bit simpler. Sometimes, that bulkier pad might be a little more complicated figuring out places to put this thing. That being said, as you guys might notice, it's got a pretty large cassette on here. The older one was smaller. And so, some of those safety squat bar stands, it's not going to fit with this big thing on. So I've actually attached it to the wall, almost the way it's sitting now. I put a sit up there on the wall. I can show you guys later. And that's how I've been able to store this thing. So that's a little bit of a problem, but that being said, it's certainly not a deal breaker. First thing you're going to notice, and what I noticed actually, which I'll say, I'm going to go ahead and just say this. So sorry, Kabuki guys. This sticker is a little corny, to be honest with you. Yeah, this big X on the side just didn't really sell me. I kind of feel like they could have cleaned that up, and on the inside too, where they have the labels, and I'll show you guys this in a second. They just put little stickers on this thing, and so I feel like for the price you're paying, the old Transformer bars, it was machined, it kind of inscribed, lettering. I wish they would have done that here. Obviously, that might have been somewhat cost prohibitive, maybe. But again, this isn't a cheap bar exactly, so I feel like maybe they could have done that. Invariably, this is going to get scratched. The stickers get scratched, and so instead of saying goblet, it's going to say got or something, right? It's going to get a slash through it. So I feel like these stickers may not hold up forever. So that's just kind of one of my first criticisms. I'll jump out. Obviously, though, I didn't buy this thing for the looks. Some people out there, though, obviously might have. It's got a much smoother coating on this thing. So the other coating, it had a little more, grip to it. This is nice and slick, kind of jet black. So looks cool. Unfortunately, though, your hands do slide on this a little bit more. And so one of the things I wish this wouldn't. So these screw on, and the old bars came with a nice little short one. This one comes with only the longer handles, and I kind of like the short ones actually. So this knurling down here is nice. One other criticism I'm going to jump out at is the way these screw on. It's both the same direction, and a lot of times I like to come in here and kind of tighten my hands on it, and so I find myself always unscrewing this side, unfortunately, because I have to, it screws in this way, and so I'm always kind of unlocking that. So not a big gripe, just one of those things. I wish if they could have changed the threading there, it would have been nice, so I'm not always unscrewing this thing. But overall, I think this is a pretty cool looking bar. Definitely has a little bit more, I'd say probably commercial appeal. I imagine this is also somewhat of a business decision, which is a smart one on the part of Kabuki Bar. It looks good. It's definitely more plug and play, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that in a minute. And then again, you can pop this thing on here pretty quick and easily, and there, there you're ready to go. Now, one thing I will say about the old pad doesn't look very cool. This one obviously looks better. It's more ergonomic, because it's got this nice cutout. It's firmer. It's more rigid. And so in that sense, I actually would say this thing is probably a little bit less comfortable to me. And again, I didn't go super heavy on this. I only went up to about 315, as I mentioned, which is kind of where I live these days. And so this thing, I do feel, because this thing conforms around, I feel it in the front of me a little bit, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So when this thing is up here, I do feel this thing kind of digging in just a little bit into my pecs, and I feel like that's going to be one of the shortcomings of this. Is it's really hard to get anything universal because there's just so many different shapes and sizes of people. The old one was a little more generic, so in a sense it didn't conform as readily. But that being said, it was just kind of plush, kind of sunk into you, but it wasn't terribly uncomfortable. Obviously the guys at Kabuki talk a lot about the comfort of this pad. I really didn't find the old one to be that uncomfortable. Maybe unsightly, but it wasn't, a deal breaker for me at all. People don't typically buy these things for the looks anyways. But that being said, this is a pretty rigid, and I think the rigidity had to be there because, if you're going to be squatting, upwards of 300, 400 plus, you are going to need some rigidity on this thing. And so you wouldn't want this to be too soft. So that being said, at lighter weights, at least, which is kind of where I've been living, I haven't found this thing to be exceptionally comfortable. It's pretty good, and it does conform to me nicely. I don't feel like the bar is going to go anywhere or slip out on me. But that being said, I wouldn't necessarily say it's really super high on the comfort because of this front, part here. So take that with a grain of salt, Kabuki. Overall, though, I do think it's kind of cool. I like the detachability a lot. All right, so I want to show you guys just a little more closely this cassette. Again, it's simpler than the old one. It's got the same, setup here in the sense that it goes from goblet to front squat, SSB, high, low, and hinge. And so all I have to do is pull that pin and just move it to where I want. It's got a pretty nice, smooth sliding mechanism, and then it just kind of pops into place. I don't feel like that's too hard to operate. And obviously you can't have any weights on here as you're doing this because, you'd have a bunch of weight here. It'd be too hard to operate. So you got to take the weights off, put it where you want. So some people might find that a drawback because, you can't interchange with weights on it so easily. But that was a drawback of the old ones too. You couldn't do that there either. So that's very nice. That's very plug and play. The old ones, which was nice, is you could adjust the length here. And so you had pretty much, there was 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And so 4 actually went a little bit longer than this did. So it seems like they kind of settled on number 3, which is a bit longer, which is good because it lowers your center of mass, which is what you want, but not to the degree that the old one does. So, I think this is nice from a commercial standpoint. If they're trying to get this into the gyms and people just want something simpler, this is nice because all you have to worry about is this. You're not worrying about this and, pulling that pin out. So I think from a feasibility perspective, this is great. For those who want that more customizability, more serious lifters, I would say, want that lower center of mass, which, in theory is actually probably better for your back. I think the old transformer bar actually shines a little bit more here. From a design perspective, I'm sure that's something you're always grappling with is, customizability versus simplicity. This one's going to be higher on the simplicity, loses a little bit of customizability, unfortunately, though. And so in that sense, I kind of like the transformer bar, the old one, better because of that number 4 that this one unfortunately doesn't have. Honestly, on the old transformer bar, I never really used 1 and 2 that much. That would be pretty close to a standard barbell, which if you're going to do that, just use a standard barbell. So to me, I would actually spend more of my time kind of 3, 4s anyways. So this one, again, you're just kind of settling on that number 3. And so that's how these guys decided to do it this time with their Transformer X. Okay, so obviously not going to lift the house on this thing today. Just coming in here with 135, just kind of warm up weight, so to speak. I've got this thing on SSB or, safety squat bar mode, which is honestly my favorite sort of configuration and setup that I would use the old one on. I probably spend the vast majority of my time in safety squat bar mode on this. And then traditionally, if I want to do a little more bias on the quads, I'll go into front squat. I don't typically go as far as goblet. That's just kind of my own thing. And then, posterior chain, I usually emphasize more doing deadlifts, trap bar deadlifts, that kind of thing. So I actually don't end up spending a lot of time going into hinge. So SSB is kind of where we're at here. Just go ahead and get into this thing. Up and out. And again, you got these long handles on here, so it kind of brings my hands down. Shorter ones would bring me up a little bit, but I'm down here. Only thing I would say, because these are so long, sometimes when you come forward, if you come forward too far, they're actually touching my knees right now. And so, you pretty much have to keep yourself a little more upright, which I guess is probably a good thing. Helps with the form a little bit. But that being said, if you do lean too far forward, you just have to be ready for this thing to probably hit you in the knees, which may or may not feel good depending on how quickly you're coming down with this thing. So here's the old, transformer bar, sort of the OG. Again, for those of you looking for a deeper dive on this, I did a more thorough video on this transformer bar, which I'll link at the end of this. But again, here's the pad. Again, very simple, aesthetically not especially pleasing. It's got their logo on here with a little American flag. It's kind of cool. It's sort of catchy. It looks more like old school vintage in a way. Certainly something you might find in an older gym than sort of a modern Equinox. But that being said, it's plush enough. It's pretty comfortable. I never really thought anything about the discomfort on this. So I wouldn't necessarily make a lot of this new pad. It's got kind of a coolness factor to it, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's like way more comfortable than this thing. Quite frankly, I actually kind of like the plushness way it feels in my shoulders at some of the heavier squats, at least that I've done so far up to this point. If I change my mind on that, though, I will get back to you guys and let you know. And so, as I mentioned, this cassette's quite a bit smaller than the other one. It doesn't have some tacky sticker on it. It's got these, lettering is etched in, and so I like that a lot. And again, not to harp on the sticker. Once you put a plate on there, the silver lining is you don't really see the silver, that sticker. But I'm hoping the guys are going to do something about that. So Kabuki, that's a freebie for you. Here, obviously, you can see how this arm is longer. The other one I think settles kind of more about a number 3. This one you can go to number 4 again to bring that down a little bit lower for that lower center of mass, which again I like better when I'm going a bit heavier. So for me, that's a perk. I like this coating on this one a little bit better too, actually. Maybe it doesn't have as much curb appeal. It's not that nice slick jet black like the other one is. But it's got a little more grip to it. So, it's got these nubby handles again, which I like, and I'm hoping I can get for the other one. But the top part still has a little bit of grip too, whereas the other one's just really slick. And so I feel like, never had a problem holding on to this thing, even with these nubby handles on it. And I like that a lot. So again, for me, this customizability, and again, I'm a more seasoned lifter, so to speak, not to toot my own horn, but I like this extra, customizability. For some people, this might be information overload. They get over here and they're adjusting this and that. Maybe they don't like that as much. But for me, this is kind of a perk. And so in that sense, the old Transformer bar gets the win. All right, so that's a Transformer X for today. Definitely a pretty cool product. I do like it. I had a little criticism for it, but nothing was a major knock. Some of it was more almost cosmetic. What I will say is, for those of you who already have a Transformer bar, the old one, assuming it's in good condition, to my mind, I would say if you're a pretty serious lifter, you have it, you're happy with it. I don't necessarily think you need this thing. So guys at Kabuki may not like that. Sorry, I'm not helping you sell more bars. I think it is a cool bar for somebody who's more of a novice getting started, not as familiar with the Transformer bars, and wants something a little more plug and play, kind of on that simplicity end. And again, that has to do with the fact that moving these, extending this out a little bit more is something that's lost on this bar, which you had with the old one. So, again, I think this thing is probably more going to be, commercially viable. I could see this thing in a commercial gym, and whereas the other one, I think it's probably a little awkward. You're worried about losing these pins and stuff like that. This thing is all held together. You basically screw this in with Loctite, and so, it's pretty much set once you're there. I do like the smoothness, though, of changing that cassette. One of the drawbacks, again, is just that it's a little harder to store because this cassette is so large, but again, not a big deal breaker. And so for some of you guys watching this video today who've never used this Transformer bar, I think this is a pretty good starting point. I don't think this is a bad way to go at all. You can still go pretty heavy at it. It's going to lower your center of mass. It's going to, check a lot of boxes off the list. And so, if you're on the fence, should I get the old one? Should I get the new one? I would say it probably depends partly on how serious you're going to get with it. And then again, how much you value that simplicity. For me, again, I think the older Transformer bar is going to be, probably where I'm going to spend a little more of my time, because I really do like that number 4 a little bit better than I like, being at number 3, which is where I'm at here. And especially as I'm getting heavier. If I had a lighter squat day or a squat day where I'm using BFR, not going so heavy, number 3 is great. But I like that, number 4 when I'm trying to go a little heavier, just because I feel like it's a little bit, easier on the back. And that's just my 2 cents, again, as a physical therapist. I had some back pain in the past. Luckily, I don't have any right now, but I'm trying to keep it that way. And I still like to squat, and I'm going to try to see if I can keep doing that, hopefully for the near future here. But that's the video for today. I was really excited about getting this bar and testing it out. And obviously, there was a lot of hype on Kabuki's end about this bar. And overall, hey, I think it's a pretty good product. So I wouldn't necessarily say don't get one. I would just say that there are certain lifters it's going to appeal to more than others. And so again, that's my 2 cents. If you like this stuff, go ahead and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think. Certainly comment below. And as always, I hope you guys have some fun.